A kid gets stopped by cops for stealing a bike. He calmly says, "My dad's Special Forces." 5 minutes later, the entire block falls silent. Dusk had just begun to settle over the quiet streets of South Oak Ridge, North Carolina, as 14-year-old Malachi Turner pedaled his bike toward home. He was still wearing the sweat-soaked basketball jersey from that afternoon's practice. In his backpack were a pair of worn-out sneakers, a half-empty water bottle, and a sandwich his mom had hastily wrapped that morning. Malachi wasn't listening to music. He liked the sound of the wind brushing past his ears, the rhythm of the tires on pavement, and the rare calm that came in the evenings, a peace he seldom found after long, exhausting school days. But that calm vanished the moment red and blue lights flashed behind him. "Stop right there," a voice barked, sharp and commanding. Malachi hit the brakes. He turned his head, slightly startled, as 2 police officers stepped out of a patrol car. "Where you headed?" one of them asked, his tone anything but friendly. "Home," Malachi answered, trying to stay calm. "You match the description of a suspect in a recent bike theft," said the other officer, his eyes scanning Malachi like he was already guilty. The boy said nothing. "This your bike?" "Yes, sir." "Got any papers for it?" "No, sir, but it was a birthday gift from my mom." The first officer let out a mocking laugh. "Oh, how convenient. Your mom gave you the exact kind of bike the victim described." Malachi clenched his jaw. He remembered what his father, Lincoln Turner, once told him. In moments like this, the most important thing you can do is stay calm. He was trying to do just that. "Can I call my dad?" he asked. "Who's your dad?" the officer replied, sounding bored. "His name's Lincoln Turner. He serves in the National Special Task Force." The 2 officers looked at each other and burst into laughter. "You expect us to believe that? A kid in a backwards cap on an old bike saying his dad's Special Forces? What next? He's a 4-star general." Their sarcasm made Malachi grip the handlebars tighter. He didn't get angry. He was used to this. Used to the suspicious stares when he walked into stores. Used to being asked which side of town you from whenever he passed through the richer neighborhoods. But tonight, it stung a little more. The officers stepped closer. One of them had started unlocking a pair of cuffs. "We'll sort this out at the station." Malachi swallowed hard. He hadn't done anything wrong. He just wanted to go home. But under the pulsing lights of red and blue, his truth didn't seem to matter. He could only hope his father would get there in time. "We'll talk it out back at the station," the officer repeated, drawing closer, the cuffs glinting under the streetlight. His face showed no doubt, only contempt. Malachi stood still, spine tight as a wire. He looked around. The street was dark and silent, swallowing every sound. No one came out. No one wanted to get involved. Same as always. At that exact moment, the screech of tires sliced through the night. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows roared up and slammed to a stop behind a patrol car. Its headlights stayed on, flooding the narrow street with light, like a stage waiting for the main act to begin. One of the officers turned, his hand instinctively resting on his holstered gun. "Who the hell is this?" The car door opened. First came a pair of desert tan combat boots. Then stepped out a tall man in a windproof tactical jacket, hair cropped close to the scalp. His face was calm, ice-cold, composed, but what silenced the entire street was his eyes. Eyes that looked like they had just returned from war. Eyes that carried more authority than any badge. Malachi exhaled softly, so quietly no one heard it. "Dad?" "What's going on here?" The man spoke, his voice low but firm, like a command echoing across a training ground. "This is police business," one of the officers snapped, though his tone now held a trace of hesitation. "The kid matches the description of a bike theft suspect. We're following protocol." The man didn't respond right away. He took a slow, measured step forward, then another, stopping right in front of them. From inside of his jacket, he pulled out a black leather wallet. Not for cash, but for an ID badge. He held it up at eye level. "Lieutenant Colonel Lincoln Turner, Federal Special Operations, ID 50,499, National Rapid Response Command." The air around them froze. Officer Crawley, the one who had just gripped Malachi's wrist like he was a criminal, stood still, his face flushing. Sweat beaded along his temple. Beside him, Officer Ramos, the younger of the two, stayed alert but clearly deferred to Crawley, waiting for direction. Lieutenant Colonel Turner kept the badge held steady between them. His voice didn't rise. He didn't need to. Every word landed like forged steel. What exactly were you planning to teach my son tonight? Crawley opened his mouth to respond, then shut it again under the harsh yellow glow of the street lamp. Every twitch on his face looked like a misstep on a stage. We were just following standard procedure, Ramos chimed in, his voice taut. There was a call about a missing bike. The kid matched the description, so... Description? Turner raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. Let me hear that description. And don't tell me it was a black kid in athletic were riding alone, because I can name 30 kids from Jefferson Middle School who fit that exact profile. Crawley swallowed hard, glancing briefly down at the body cam clipped to his chest. We didn't mean any disrespect. The boy was cooperative, but his attitude changed when he claimed his father was military. Unusual. Lincoln stepped forward, forcing Ramos to instinctively backpedal half a step. You think he made it up? Lie about his father being special ops? You think only someone who looks like you can have a father like me? No one answered. A breeze drifted in from Lake Marion, rustling the trees that lined the quiet road. But the air between the three men on Westbury Lane felt heavy, thick with something far colder than night. Let go of my son, Lincoln said. This time his voice didn't ask. It commanded. Crawley's hand trembled slightly as he unlocked the cuffs. Malachi stepped back, rubbing at the red marks on his wrist, but saying nothing. He didn't cry. He simply looked up at his father, eyes filled with both gratitude and ache, as if trying to imprint every detail into memory. Lincoln tucked away his military ID, his gaze sweeping across both officers. There's no need to review body cam footage, he said. I've seen enough. I'll be reporting this incident directly to your regional command. No justification needed. Crawley opened his mouth, but only managed a weak, stumbling sentence. We didn't mean you understand, right? Lincoln didn't respond. He bent down, picked up Malachi's torn backpack near the curb, then turned and placed a hand gently but firmly on his son's shoulder. You all right? He asked quietly. Malachi nodded, though his shoulders still shook slightly. Yeah, I'm all right, Dad. There's one thing I know better than most, Lincoln said, his voice low, eyes still forward. I won't raise my voice. I won't lose control. But remember this. Respect isn't something you prove with a badge or an ID. It's how you treat someone when no one's watching. The officers remained silent. The patrol car's lights dimmed as the two men instinctively stepped back, no longer armed with justification, or the nerve to offer one. Father and son walked beneath the streetlight, leaving the officers behind in silence. Malachi could feel the warmth of his father's hand on his shoulder, strong, steady, and unshaken. They turned into the alley behind Westbury Pharmacy, where only a few flickering bulbs lit the cracked pavement. Malachi said nothing. He carried his ripped backpack in his left hand, his right arm still tingling for where the cuffs had pressed into his skin. His father, Lieutenant Colonel Lincoln Turner, walked beside him, silent. His posture was calm, his step steady, but Malachi knew, behind that composed face, a volcano rumbled beneath the snow. Dad. Malachi's voice was soft, but echoed clearly in the stillness of night. Why is it always me? Why do they always look at me like I've done something wrong, when I'm just riding my bike home? Lincoln stopped. He didn't turn to his son right away. Instead, he exhaled a long breath, as if that question had been tucked away in his chest for years. Since the day he was a boy standing on a sidewalk, stopped by the police just because he looked like someone. Finally, he turned. His eyes weren't angry, just heavy with a sadness that ran deep. Because there are some people, Malachi, he said slowly, who can only respect someone when they see a badge or a rank or a title. But if all they see is a black boy on a bike, then to them, you don't matter. Malachi lowered his head, eyes brimming with unshed tears. But Lincoln continued, his voice tightening, you owe them nothing, not an explanation, not a lowered voice, not even your fear. A cold gust blew through the hem of Lincoln's coat. In the distance, A late-night city bus rumbled through the intersection, tires hissing along the pavement like an unanswered cry. "You don't have to prove you're worthy of respect," Lincoln said, "because your existence already is." Malachi gripped the strap of his backpack tighter. In his eyes now glimmered something more than hurt, something older than his years. A quiet kind of growing up, not taught in classrooms, but forged on the walk home, in every suspicious glance, every baseless question. "I hate this feeling, Dad," he whispered. "I hate the way they look at me like I'm the problem." Lincoln placed a hand on his shoulder and squeezed gently. "And that," he said, "is why I'm here, because I'll do everything I can to make this world shift, even just a little, before it's your turn to do the same for your own child." Malachi looked up at his father. In the shadows, he stood tall, not because of his rank or uniform, but because of how he met injustice without ever bowing to it. They walked on. Around the next corner, a neighbor, Ms. Etta Morris, peeked through her curtain. She had witnessed the whole thing from afar. Her eyes were red-rimmed, watching the silhouettes of father and son disappear beneath the trees. She turned back inside, picked up her phone, and typed a message for social media. Not every boy has a father who's special ops, but every boy deserves to be treated with respect. Within hours, that short message had been shared thousands of times. Malachi's story, what seemed like a quiet night on a quiet street, had begun to ripple out, touching hearts not because of badges or ranks, but because of truth and compassion. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the old oak trees lining Maplewood Avenue, Malachi stepped outside, backpack slung over one shoulder. He wasn't riding his bike like usual. It still sat in the garage, its handlebar bent from the scuffle with the officers the night before. But Malachi didn't feel angry, or even sad. He felt lighter. Last night, after everything, he and his dad had sat together for a long time, not to vent, not to break down, just to eat, quietly, the stir-fried noodles his mom had left on the stove before heading to her overnight shift still warm. The kitchen light dim, the clinking of forks and plates the only sound between them. But in that silence, Malachi understood more than words ever could. His father, Lieutenant Colonel Lincoln Turner, never had to shout, never had to threaten. He just stood there, unmoving, like bedrock in a storm. Not because he was special ops, but because he knew exactly who he was. And he passed that knowledge on to his son, not through lectures, but through action. On the walk to school, Malachi passed a few neighbors. Their glances weren't the same as yesterday. No more suspicion. One man raised a hand and called out, "You okay, young man?" Malachi nodded and kept walking. The story had spread. Someone had recorded the confrontation between Lincoln and the officers and posted it online. Within hours, it went viral. The comments were mixed as always, but most were stunned, supportive, moved. This isn't just about one boy. This is about how we treat a whole generation. At school, when Malachi walked to the main hallway, something felt different. A group of boys from the basketball team, who usually barely notice him, walked up and clapped him on the shoulder. "Yo, Mal, I saw the video," one of them said. "You held your ground, man." Malachi just smiled. He didn't have to explain what happened. He didn't have to say, "My dad is somebody," because now he knew true strength doesn't come from titles or rank. It comes from holding your dignity when others try to strip it away, from staying calm in the middle of the storm. After school, Malachi stopped by the library at a corner table. He opened a blank notebook and began to write. "I used to think strength meant making people afraid of you, but Dad showed me that real strength is when you don't need fear to make people listen." He didn't fight. He didn't yell, but the whole street went silent when he showed up. "I don't know what I'll be when I grow up, but I know I want to be like my dad. Not because of the uniform, but because of the quiet strength, because of the heart that never backs down. He taught me one thing. You don't have to prove your worth. You just have to hold it." He put the pen down and closed the notebook. Outside, the afternoon sun filtered to the library windows, casting soft golden light across the worn wooden table. It was an ordinary day, but for Malachi Turner, it was the day he decided he would never lower his head again. Not out of anger, but because he finally understood what true strength really means.